Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. We welcome you all to this afternoon session on managing the water, food, energy nexus. My name's Andrew Rugasira, and I'll be the headmaster this afternoon. We thank you for taking the time to be here. I'd like to introduce some of the panelists up here. Just to let you know that in about 5-10 minutes, the Minister of Water and Environmental Affairs of South Africa will be joining us, so we'll just pause and as she comes in. I'm proud to introduce Madam Sheila Sisulu, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations World Food Programme based in Rome. Mr. James Collins, Jr., he's the President of DuPont Crop Protection, DuPont in the USA. Mr. Xolani Mkhwanazi. I hope I'm getting that right, Mr. Xolani. He's the chairman of BHP. Is that a nod or is that a shake of the head? He's the chairman of BHP Billiton, South Africa. And last but not least, Mr. Namanga Ngongi. He's the president of Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. He's from Cameroon. He says all Ugandans are from Cameroon, but we'll have that debate at the end. I'd just like to frame the question and the issue that we need to address this afternoon in this way. With continuing population growth, rising energy demand, and the growing impact of climate change, the water, food, energy nexus is becoming of central concern, both to the world and foremost here in Africa. We want to address in our conversation, in our discussion, in our dialogue this afternoon, how African governments, business, and the general citizenry can work across boundaries to ensure that this bottleneck is turned into a sustainable growth and development opportunity. The session will take the following format. I'll allow each of the participants here to make brief remarks, 3 to 5 minutes each. And then I'll then draw out some of the key points that they've raised. A dialogue will ensue, and then we'll take it up to a point of Q&A with your audience participation. I hope we can be out of here by 3:15. Thank you very much. So I'll invite Madam Sisulu to make her opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to you to indulge me in telling you a grounding Mandela story, which I hope will actually ground this conversation as we go forward. President Mandela, former President Mandela of South Africa, tells personally a story about how he, while he was president, was walking around in his village in Qunu, in the Eastern Cape, and he came upon these women who seemed to be doing something with mud. And he said to them, "What are you doing with this mud?" And they looked at him like he was from another planet. They didn't know he was president. They don't have television, so they didn't even care. And they kind of looked at him like, you know, "We're trying to get water. Can't you see?" And they were taking handfuls or bucketfuls of water, of mud, which they were settling in a bucket to try and have the mud go down so they can get water to use for their homes, for their cooking, for their food security. And so I'm saying it's a grounding story because that is what we're talking about when we talk about that nexus of water, energy, and food security. At the point of that nexus, I would want to put it to you that we find women right at that point, and as we discuss and develop solutions, unless those solutions are going to change the lives of those women who are trying to extract water from mud, then our solutions may be scientifically correct, may be technologically advanced, but if they don't change the lives of people, they may not actually be of much use for us. I'd like, in that regard, to share with you also what we in WFP have been doing in partnership with governments, with women in some instances. And I think a good example would be helping women, particularly in refugee camps, women in who are in IDP camps, who have a very limited range. Most women will walk 10 kilometers maybe to go and find wood for energy, or another few kilometers to find water at great risk to ensure food security. The women in camps have a limited range because they are in camps. They're not allowed, in some cases, to go beyond their camps for too long a distance. So very soon, once a camp is set up, the forests disappear. And so what we are doing at WFP is to work with the private sector, with governments and other innovators to develop safe stoves. These are very basic mud and clay stoves that use very slow combustion so that women use less wood in order to cook their food. They don't have to walk long distances. They can conserve that food. The other is, again, in Ethiopia. This we use mainly a lot in Kenya. In Ethiopia, we have worked with the government and the leadership of the government of Ethiopia for the last 20 years, who have reclaimed through what they call a merit system, which in Amharic means land, but it's a land reclamation program where they've actually reclaimed 300,000 hectares of land, degraded land, not only the land, but also the water, because they've done a management system around the water catchment areas where the community has rebuilt and terraced that land to make sure that the erosion doesn't happen. This is land where people were ready to abandon. They were ready to leave, to find greener pastures, and where now, not only have they stayed, they are growing fruit trees. And these are solutions that the local people, supported by their government, the international community, have in fact put in place. So land terracing using low-tech, mass-based, cost-efficient technology does result in a situation where people are able to cope with the ravages of climate change, if you want, where they're able to conserve what they have and where they're able to consume what they have conserved much more efficiently. So there are practical, people-based solutions that are scalable that we should look at to change people's lives. And we can share some of those with you. I think a more innovative one, and this is my final point, a more innovative one that we're doing with WFP is weather risk insurance. Again, we're doing it in Ethiopia, but we're also working with the AU to help governments help the smallholder farmers share risk. It's a weather risk insurance pool, which some of you may have heard. It was used in the Caribbean, and in fact, in the recent earthquake in Haiti, it paid out to Haiti a small amount because Haiti had put into the Caribbean risk pool, a small premium for earthquakes, because the last earthquake they'd had was 200 years previously. They'd put more of their premium for hurricanes. Yeah. But this would be another innovation that we would like to share with you. Thank you very much.
James, I was going to ask you to make some remarks, but your time's taken. Sorry.
No.
James, go ahead. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Really great opportunity to be here. And clearly my experience is in the agricultural space, so my comments will be a little focused on that. The title of this panel, food, energy, and water, that nexus, we don't see those as incompatible. We believe that nexus can be managed very effectively. And I'll boil it down to, I think, two key opportunity areas. One is agricultural productivity, and I think that's a theme of certainly the meetings these few days, and I've had the really great opportunity to join some of the working teams on things like the agricultural corridors in Mozambique, and now the new one that we're proposing in the southern corridor in Tanzania, and I'm really encouraged by the work that's gone on. It's an opportunity to bring much higher yielding varieties. The president the other day in his opening comments talked about a 7x improvement in productivity. Well, if we can produce that much grain off of an acre, it really frees the hunger and nutrition issue, and now we have agricultural products that can be diverted to solve this energy problem. And at the same time, if we're producing all of that grain off of the same acre and the same amount of water, we just increased the water productivity by 7x as well. So another important area around productivity is crop losses. 20 to 40% of a crop is lost once it's put in the ground due to competition for water and nutrients from weeds and also from insect damage. And we know that we can solve this problem. On top of that, another 40 to 50% of that crop is lost once it comes off of the field, getting to its final destination through storage losses and through transportation losses. So 50 to 60% of the DNA genetic productive capacity of that plant is lost before it can ever do any good. So one opportunity area is this productivity equation, and I know that we can solve that. Second is water efficiency, and I think that's a key theme here. Farmers around the world, 80% of them still till their land before putting crops into the ground. And we know that through no-till systems, we can dramatically improve the water use and the water efficiency. We also have new application methods, new seed treatments, along with other reductions in the use of water to spray and apply certain other products that we know can make a huge difference. That same area around productivity is we believe biotechnology can make a big difference here, and working with governments, working with regulators to approve the use of those products, I think is key to that equation. So two key opportunity areas. How do we solve those? I think first is about access. It's about access to knowledge. It's about access to better inputs and technologies. And certainly DuPont, along with the crop science industry, is really focused on training and development, working in public-private partnerships to really educate and making sure that all growers in these markets have access to this. A great example is this water-efficient maize partnership that we have here in Africa, working with the public sector and several private companies. We are developing drought-tolerant maize that will grow with 25 to 30% less water utilization. Yeah. The second way to solve this problem is investment. Now, certainly as the private industry, we have the responsibility to invest substantially in research and development, and DuPont, along with the other science-based companies, are doing that. Research to improve farming practices, better water-efficient uses across that whole food production process, I think are real opportunities.
Can I just suggest something? We'll have subsequent opportunity to elaborate.
Right.
So let's just keep this to as brief as we can, and then we can bring out the depth in the subsequent conversations. Thanks, James. Sorry about that.
So may I finish one comment about investment is around infrastructure. I think in addition to the technology investments, in partnership with the local governments, that investment in infrastructure to get these products to market is so critical.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Namanga, Mr. Namanga.
Thank you.
I can't reach you here with my stick, so I'll just take it. You'll speak for 3 minutes.
Okay. Clearly, this is an important subject to discuss, because the water issue especially is going to become more and more serious in Africa because of climate change. I am in agriculture. I look at this more from the agricultural point of view, but clearly it's a continuum of water, agriculture, energy. It's continuum. It's not really distinct issues. But African agriculture is basically rain-fed. Maximum is 7% of agricultural land in Africa is irrigated. Asia was about that level in 1960. Today they are at 40% of agricultural land is irrigated. And we can see the results. India, that was described as a basket case when I was a young person, today has probably in their reserves almost 1 year of food stock in stock. So it clearly makes a big difference. There is need to invest in irrigation. It's always said, oh, Africa doesn't have the same water advantages as in Asia, the big rivers and big floodplains. But we have the Nile, we have the Niger, we have the Congo, and we have the Zambezi. Clearly, there is opportunity to use more of the water for not only for agriculture, but also for energy, if we really put efforts to it. It is possible also to improve the management of water that falls as rain. Okay? We in many countries, I come from a country, I come from Cameroon. In my village, we have at least 3,000 millimeters of rain a year. For 4 months, we have to ration water in a year. There are countries with 500 millimeters a year, they don't have to ration water, which means that if we can manage the water a little bit better than we are doing today. I can only cite one example. Burkina Faso is in the desert, and anybody can go to Burkina Faso and see the difference that little dams, infrastructures have made, the difference they have made in the country. A country that was heavily food aid dependent is today more or less adequately food secure. So I would say there are opportunities, and we can discuss those as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Namanga. Xolani?
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon, folks. I come from a big company that happens to cover a bit of the spectrum we're talking about. We mine coal, we supply to Eskom, then we consume a lot of it in making aluminium and also in doing the same mining. I think there's huge opportunities in industry-to-industry collaboration here. Our mines are close to Eskom power stations. They use a lot of water, so do we. We don't supply each other with this water. We don't circulate the water amongst ourselves. There's an opportunity there. A couple of weeks ago, I had to approve a capital project for a water treatment plant. And when I was quizzing these guys, and I discovered it would only take 10% more budget to purify the water to drinkable water. But we don't. We just purify to the level where we just dispose back to the wild, and we could have just 10% more in budget produce water that we could supply to municipalities around. These are the things that we all need to sit down and think about it and talk about them across boundaries, as the topic says, discussions between us and the municipalities, companies and government. How can we work together? We could set up small-scale farming in the area with the same water, supplying the same water. We are also very energy intensive, therefore polluters quite a bit to the environment. In our social investment budgets, why don't we target, for example, planting trees, re-greening, so that we can create what we call carbon sinks, carbon dioxide sinks. These are the things I think, as we discuss this afternoon, we should start looking at, and who can talk or do what with whom in order to make sure there's better use of the water, of the environment, of our energy resources. Is that 3 minutes?
As the chairman of your big company, you've displayed your characteristic talent in keeping time. Thank you. If I may just draw out some of the key themes as I saw them. Sheila really addressed the issue of women, so there's a gender perspective to this, and the need to focus on the gender perspective of this, because then it highlights intervention opportunities that can be taken, and therefore the appropriate technologies that can be positioned. James addressed more the issue of agriculture productivity, and really addressed an issue which is not really in the debate, the issue of crop loss from the farm gate right through to the market. And that needs to be addressed. So there's a lot of access to knowledge there that's required. Dr. Namanga talked about the nature of agriculture being rain-fed and low-cost irrigation strategies that can be adopted and key important management strategies for water. Xolani, your point of greater collaboration, sharing of information, more focused strategies, I think you have the panel and the people who can contribute to that. I wanted us to take the next few minutes just kind of building up on that. And I'd just like to give you some key pointers. What are the trends in Africa in these various areas that we're discussing? How does water play a key role in ensuring economic growth regionally, nationally? When you talk of food production, what are the key drivers? And how can we develop strategies for energy generation, for industrial activity? And how can we address this nexus in a real sense, you know, holistically? And then I really want to encourage you and also to encourage people who are going to be asking questions to focus on a more action-oriented conclusion to this question. So I'll open up the floor, and whoever would like to start, please go ahead. And we'll keep them short and crisp again. Thank you. Can I start here going down?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure.
It's an open floor now.
You raised some great points, and if I think about agriculture, you know, you said what role does water play? Well, 70% of the blue water globally is consumed by agriculture. So, I mean, without water, there is no food production. So that's why it is so critical to that, and improving productivity so that we can continue to use the same amount of water and produce much more, I think, is a core of it. I'll go back to one other point that you were making, this issue around crop loss. If I had 50% more production off of the same land today, these crops in the local villages, in local cities, it frees that agricultural produce up to be used for other things, which is why I'm here. I believe a part of the energy solution is agriculture. These excess productions can be put to productive use. And in India, we see villages coming together using the waste from fruits and vegetable productions in fermentation systems, in combustion systems to actually generate heat and energy for the local village. So I like this nexus because I think all three of those are inextricably linked together.
Thank you. Sheila?
I think Namanga talked about the fact that agriculture in Africa is 70% rain-fed or 7% irrigated. Yeah. What we're seeing is with the repeated disasters that are occurring, whether they are droughts or floods, that the rain-fed agriculture will lose productivity by up to 50%. And so unless there are systems that are put in place to weatherproof food security in those situations, then we're going to see greater food insecurity and possible conflict.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would say that in agriculture, we all decry the lack of investment in agriculture. Why are investors so hesitant? Because of the risks that they see in agriculture, and one of the principal risks is uncertainty about the weather, about harvest, about drought. And if we could try to reduce that uncertainty, we will probably get a lot more investments in agriculture. Of course, producing more to lose more, as James said, that would be foolish. So, which of course we should do a lot more to protect that what we have now. There are strategies already in place that we can expand, upscale, to, let me say, reduce vulnerability to water. One is the breeding of shorter cycle crops that have made maize, which is 3.5 months instead of 5 months. Having cowpeas today, which are from planting to harvest in 50 days. So you can actually skip a period of drought, or you can even replant during the same planting season. Or using lime so that the roots of a plant can go deeper into the soil and explore more groundwater. So there are strategies which can be actually upscaled today.
Thank you. Xolani, would you have anything to add?
I think there's another point here we could add. I think the role of skills development, the role of educating people in general, and particularly farmers, on how best to manage and conserve land conservation, efficient way of irrigating without being wasteful, educating them the role of good quality fertilizers to improve productivity, and the general awareness of the relationship between responsible farming and protecting the environment. The role of replacing indigenous vegetation, indigenous trees, while farming productively. I think we're not doing enough in the area of awareness creation.
Thank you. Maybe if I can just deepen the discussion a little bit on that. I see two areas coming out. One is on appropriate technology, and therefore also the strategies that emanate from that kind of discussion. And the other one is one of financing. And I think agriculture production, productivity issues in Africa are really pinned by those two key factors. And even on infrastructure, I was reading somewhere this morning that the amount of money that's spent on drilling of boreholes and how few resources are deployed towards maintenance of those boreholes, and how that has become a real issue in terms of water availability on the continent. So I just wanted you to just discuss a little bit on the issue of financing and appropriate technology. Anyone can go first. Namanga?
Well, thank you. We'll start with financing. Clearly, it's a shame that 70% of Africa's population is in agriculture, but agriculture receives 2 to 3% of commercial bank loans. That's really, I would say, a shame. We cannot have 70% of the population's activity, and which contributes 40 to 60% of GDP in countries, receiving 2 to 3% of investment. So we do have to find ways of mobilizing the resources that are in commercial banks. In AGRA, we have put together a scheme called credit guarantee schemes, which we are using now to try to mobilize financial resources within commercial banks. And I would say with some success. Here in Tanzania, where we did partner with the financial sector deepening trust, which put $1 million, and we put in $1 million, $2 million, and leveraged $10 million. In Kenya, we have partnered with IFAD and leveraged $50 million. And with Standard Bank of South Africa, we have partnered with 5 other partners and mobilized $100 million. It can be done, but we have to find schemes which reduce the risk aversion of banks. Secondly, the government should live up to their own engagements, which were reached at Maputo, in the Maputo Conference of 2003, to put in 10% of their now national budgets into agriculture. As we are speaking today, India, even with its success in the Green Revolution, are still devoting about 15% of their national budgets in agriculture. In Africa, the average is 5%.
James, do you think that's a key issue?
Absolutely. We've had some good dialogue this week in some breakout sessions around financing being a real catalyst for agricultural productivity and growth. And in addition to some of the ideas that he shared, one great source of financing is the company that is downstream creating the demand for the productivity. They have the reason to be working with a set of growers to extend credit, to extend loans, and therefore the production that comes off of that land is the trade, is the commodity. I've extended you credit, you've provided me an output, we clear the ledger, and hopefully, and in a lot of cases, there's extra left over to feed families and provide for other financial profitability for the family. So I think not only do we have to engage governments and private sector and NGO financing, but we need the downstream industry to really look at this entire value chain and play in that value chain, as opposed to just treating all growers as a commodity, these partnerships that come together along value chains are important.
Sheila, what do you think about that issue from your perspective?
Yes, President Shisano is here, and I'd like to take the example of how we worked with when he was in government, his government in Maputo after the great floods of 2000. And the government of Mozambique said at the time, we can't just be sitting ducks like this. We need a system that tells us when such disaster is going to come. And with WFP, with other partners, worked with the government, basically because the government wanted to be in the driving seat. And what we put in the hands of the government was an early warning system that enables government ahead of time to do what President Shisano said he did with an island population, to say, this is coming your way, you better move, and evacuate people. The cost, the capacity to do that enabled not only the government to be in the driving seat, but to direct whatever assistance was needed and to avert greater cost in life and expenditure in saving. So having these, it's not a high-tech technology, it's simply being able to use weather reading capacity, pulling this information and giving that information to making that information available to governments to ward off and prepare for disasters. That saves a lot of resources
Sure.
Ahead of a disaster,
Sure.
rather than spend $4 mopping up, you spend $1 preparing.
Sure. Xolani, how do you link this nexus, this bottleneck, this pressure to generally the question of climate change in Africa? I just want to bring it down to that issue of climate change and the pressures that's creating in itself.
Well, a lot of contribution to the degradation of our environment is due to, if you like, poverty, limited energy resources, particularly for the poor and for the rural people, as they cut the trees to provide firewood, and not enough replacement of those trees. And that's a direct relationship between that and poverty. Should our governments provide alternative energy resources that would limit that, and provide awareness that if you cut a tree, you needed to have planted another or two to make sure that long-term there's sustainability. So energy conservation and the environment are related one-to-one, no other way.
Thank you. Before we open the discussion up to the floor, I'd like to invite the Minister of Water and Environmental Affairs of South Africa. She was held up in traffic. Madam Buyelwa, Patience Sonjica. I hope that's not too bad for an East African, huh?
At least that's better than Xolani.
Madam Minister, if you could just give us a three-minute contribution to the whole water, food, energy nexus, and how governments and businesses can work across boundaries to turn this bottleneck into sustainable growth.
Thank you very much. I think I need to apologize sincerely to all of you as participants in the panel, especially the moderator. I'm sure it must have been awkward for you to start the session without one of the panelists being present. I think this is an experience for me and a lesson learned about Tanzania. I want to start by saying, maybe this has been said, but I think we need to underscore the centrality of water in socio-economic development. That water is central for social purposes, but also for economic growth. That's the first thing. But also, water is threatened. We need to supply it sustainably, but it is threatened. It is threatened by a population increase. It is threatened by pollution because we pollute our water. Having said that, Africa itself has its agriculture getting rain-fed water, about plus minus 80% of agriculture is rain-fed in Africa. Which means, therefore, I want to get to the point that Xolani was mentioning on climate change. Which means, therefore, that with the threat of climate change, if we were to experience droughts in Africa, we would be facing a serious situation of a reduction in our crop yield, which is what is predicted. There is a prediction from the IPCC report that 50% of the crop yield will stand to be reduced by 2020 because of the impact of climate change. What does that then say to us? It says we must protect, we must develop, we must use efficiently. I will make those few remarks because I came at the tail end, but I thought I should just make that point that really this is the situation that we'll be confronted with, especially as climate change is the biggest threat. Also, what will be important to us, especially talking about the nexus and appreciating the centrality of water in all of these things, because if there's scarcity of water, surely it will have a knock-over effect on food production. Hence, then I said we need to protect, we need to develop, we need to use efficiently. And that's really key for Africa. And we can't do that alone. In order for you to do that, starting with agriculture, we use a lot of South Africa only. We use about 60% of our fresh water for irrigation. It's important, we can't reduce that. But we could reduce that if we had water efficiency technology. Who brings that? The partnership then comes in. The issue of the private sector making available that technology to us. On the other hand, governments creating an enabling environment for these partnerships. So I would make those few remarks and then I can come back later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Can I open this to the floor? Jen Omar at the back. Could someone get him a microphone? I'll have Omar and then the lady here and then James.
Hi, my name is Omar Benyada from African Business. With regards to water in general, my question is who takes the lead? Namanga was saying that we've got a number of rivers, we've got quite a lot of water throughout the continent, but we had a problem with the Inga Dam whereby it could be a producer of energy, for example, but we still haven't come to a solution. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Former President, but I think with Mozambique, one of the problems with the floods was that downstream people released water from the dams to avoid floods in their country, which meant that Mozambique got all the water. So basically, we need to look at it holistically, but who takes the lead in that respect? Because we're looking at a problem from a continental perspective, but we've obviously got individual countries. So is this something which should be done at AU level, or should it be done at a regional level? Where does it all start? Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Can we take 2-3 questions and then we can have a discussion? The lady here. And then James is next, and then I'll come back to you in the second round. I'll come back to you.
My name is Snowy. I'm from South Africa. I'm responsible for an institution under the minister that is responsible for building bulk infrastructure for raw water. One of the things that is very interesting, which is something that I did not hear the panel talking about, is how does governments use available infrastructure for economic growth in the area? And I'm saying this because when I look at what we did in Lesotho Highlands, there's a lot of water that is coming out. Now the water has been dammed to provide South Africa with the required water, particularly around the Gauteng, Johannesburg area. If you look at what that project did, it also provided electric power for the area. So Basotho people, while they're providing water for South Africa, the benefits for them is that they have energy that is coming out of the hydropower. The second thing is that if you look at agriculture around the area, the Basotho people are able to use the land around the dam to supply themselves with food, particularly vegetables and fruit. The third thing is tourism around the area, water skiing, and many other projects. So there's a lot that around the infrastructure in most of the countries. If one look at, for example, the Nile River, what is it that as a continent, what is it that we can do to do more around the infrastructure that we're building on water? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Snow. Can I just request that you keep your comments short and you make your questions specific so that the panel can be able to address them. James, and then I'll go to the second round. Your name and...
Thank you. My name is James Nyoro. I work for Rockefeller Foundation based in Nairobi. We have an initiative on climate change, building adaptation and resilience for communities and individuals. And I'll come to my question on climate change later, but let me ask a question to Jim here. In Africa, I do appreciate the fact that technology, appropriate technology, is going to bring us this nexus. And we have no choice. I think the technology should be the driving force. But in Africa, research, R&D is considered to be a public good. Now, you are also dealing with extremely poor people who eventually will be the adopters of that particular technology. How do you see the private sector working in and be accepted by government as an engine of driving the technology? Because the technology that we are talking about must be fast, timely, it must be quick. I don't think we are talking about 20 years, it must be quick. So how do you see that nexus coming in, and who pays for it? Because ultimately you are not going to charge all the intellectual property right on that poor small-scale farmer. That's one question. The second one is, when you look at this nexus, I think it's bigger than probably we have approached it. When you look at the impact of climate change, most of the power generated within Africa is hydro. Now, when floods come in and droughts come in, it means you either have too much water, so your machines are washed away, or you have no water at all, and therefore you are not generating any power. That is what happened to Accra, that's what happened to Nairobi 2 years ago. Now the question really is, how do you then start as countries start moving away out of hydroelectric power into greener energy, which requires investments now paid by current consumers for future generation who actually invest in that? I think that's really, really critical. When you come to agricultural production, the issue of financing becomes important, and what Namanga is saying is true. But remember, one of the reasons why financials were keeping off our agriculture was because of risks. And now with the climate change, the risks have increased. And that is why we need to start coming up with innovations. In Rockefeller Foundation, we are already piloting a weather index insurance for farmers based on weather. So we need to start thinking about private sector moved in technologies and pilots that will bring us closer to that nexus.
Thank you, thank you. Madam Minister, could you address the question of who takes the lead? And then, James, you can answer the question that your namesake asked. And then I'd probably ask Sheila to address Snowy's issue of infrastructure application for economic growth within the context that she raised. And let's keep our answers short and brief so that we can have more questions. Thanks.
I'm not sure. I think I missed the question that you raised.
Omar was asking who takes the lead?
In terms of?
Technology.
Technology.
Investment in water.
Well, surely, yes, I've got you. Surely government has to take the lead. This is about development and growth and development in a particular country. And if anything, public funds has to be directed. Public funds have to be directed towards that kind of investment. If you are looking at water infrastructure, it has both social, as I said, spin-offs as well as economic spin-offs. So really the initiative should be that of government. In South Africa, we have a policy that we have established. That is Water for Growth and Development Strategy, because we realize the importance of water infrastructure development for the growth of the economy. So I'm saying government has to lead, but also government has to enable the private sector to come and participate. So all of that leadership, I see it coming from government.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, thanks. And maybe I'll certainly address the agricultural question, but your question about how do we use existing infrastructure to better good, I'll just mention that certain wastewater streams can be recycled into the agricultural segment for fertilization purposes. And in the oil and gas industry, a lot of scrubbing of air exhaust contains nitrogens and some sulfurs that can be recycled into fertilizer. So I think your question is a really good one when we take a holistic approach to what do we have today and what technologies are out there that can be brought to bear. On the agricultural piece, I'll take the easy one first, the financing and the insurance. I completely agree with you. We see this evolution of risk-based finance, risk-based insurance, weather-based insurance indexing really emerging. And we know that 1 out of 7 years we're going to have a big issue, but for the other 6, there's an opportunity there to create an industry around it, and it won't happen everywhere at the same time. So working with large communities to spread that risk out over a large group of growers, where smallholders can come together in cooperatives and we can work with them as a collective. These are very important steps, and there are companies out there that will risk protect. On the final question around technology, I am a big believer that we have technologies today that can solve these issues, and I understand that there is a for the public good element. At the same time, there's a tremendous amount of research that has to get paid for as well. So the minister's comment, I just want to second that, is we have to figure out between government and industry how to collaborate like we never have before. And that means streamlining the regulations so that we can get really safe, very well-tested products to market much faster rather than the 12 years sometimes it takes us with all the testing required. We have new chemistries that we know can solve real problems, and in collaboration with governments get those products to market much faster. So this idea of collaborating to take really great technology but make sure we're bringing it to bear on the big problems has got to be core to that.
I think you've answered the question that was directed at me, but I think I want to pick up on the point that you're making about collaboration and repeat what I said earlier about our approaches, particularly to climate change. We need to detribalize. You say we need to detribalize them, because our approaches have been very tribalistic. We speak a particular tribal language, which is the language either of food security, a language of energy, a language of environment, a language, and then we think we can collaborate when we're speaking different languages. And I would like to bring even to this conversation this notion of detribalizing our approaches to solutions. And I think it speaks also to who leads, you know, which is the big tribe that's going to lead. If we break down those barriers, then we're going to find that we go towards people who have a strategic advantage over others and share the technologies. And so where it's rivers that are going through various countries, then there's a whole thing about regional collaboration in that case. But I think your question has been answered.
Thank you. Xolani, is there a way you can, before I invite Alberto to ask his question, moving towards an action-oriented agenda, just if you could say something, we just need to kind of focus on what action points we can take out of this.
Before I do, Andrew, there's another point which Sheila has just touched upon that was raised by the other James from the floor. is that of regional collaboration on big projects. He hinted at that when he was talking about the Inga River, that for example, such a project would be too big for one country. Therefore, regional collaboration in terms of offtake, making it viable, would be important. That actually can extend into even agricultural projects, irrigation projects. For example, I think it is not pie in the sky to think about in the future. It might be feasible to build big pipelines of water crossing boundaries of our countries to facilitate big agricultural projects, for example. So regional collaboration is also quite an important angle to add into this dimension. As a matter of way forward, we know, for example, again, in terms of regional collaboration, that we could start these conservation, cross-border, cross-country conservation parks, as we are doing with Mozambique and Zimbabwe, for example, in the south, the Botswana and South Africa and so on. This could be encouraged as a matter of environmental protection.
Thank you. Alberto? And then I'll have this gentleman here and this gentleman. I'll come to you at the back next. Andrew.
Thank you. My name is Alberto Fishbein, and we work in Angola. And I want to share with you our experience with safe water and safe water and food security in Angola. We produce small water plants. These are compact plants, nothing of science rocket, very simple plants that serve between 5,000 to 25,000 people, small rural communities. And we have been very, very successful doing this. The plants are given to the community. They take care of the plants. And we realized that the plants became a political tool. And the next big question is, can we charge for water? I think problem is, who's going to pay for this? In the case of Angola, the government pays for it. In the case of Malawi, we are negotiating with the government of Malawi. But definitely, people cannot pay for water.
Do you have a question in there, or was it just a comment?
No, that's my
okay,
comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please make it specific. There are a lot of hands going up. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much. My name is Belle Okello from the International Center for Research on Women. I'll beg your pardon. I've got two or so questions. The first is, based on your experiences, how can we leverage the use of especially alternative energy to enhance water and food availability, especially for the majority of those who produce our food in Africa, women? The second one is, everybody here, and at times tears come out when we talk about this, we have a lot of technologies that are available. What has stopped us so far from using these technologies to move ahead? And the last one is a conundrum that's happening in Ethiopia, where there is a process of constructing a huge dam, the Gibe 3 Dam, for hydroelectricity and produce food. But at the same time, that technology is threatening the lives of people downstream around Lake Turkana. What are your comments on this?
Okay, can I just make a point? Given the number of hands that are up, can you direct your question to, otherwise I'll have to ask everyone to answer the same question. Who would you like to answer that question? Water and conflict. Michael raised, which Sheila would like you to address. And
technologies. Clearly, there are skilled. I mean, let me say, we have not talked about solar energy, but clearly there are small solar energy plants that can be set up and can reduce tremendously the energy deficit, especially in rural areas, which would be difficult to reach with power lines. There are technologies that are available, let me say, for use of small treadle pumps for irrigation, which cost maybe $100 per pump. So it could be made more accessible to people who need to use them. there is scope to be able to use a lot of the knowledge that exists today. But as we know, the classical way of bringing knowledge to people in rural areas was through what was called extension services run by governments. And those have totally broken down in many countries, and which need some state of repair to be made. And you also need the private sector to be engaged a little bit more in doing extension work, in selling, bringing across their technologies to people.
Thank you. Madam Minister.
Thank you very much. Let me start with Alberto's question, which is actually a very provocative statement that we should not pay for water. That goes to the heart of a question, whether water should be a social right or not. And indeed, it is a very politically charged question, because it depends on the type of system of government that particular country has. I think that's one aspect, political aspect of it. But also it depends on the socio-economic conditions and the strength of that economy. It may well be that you would give water as a social right, but would it be sustainable? So I'm not answering the question, but I'm actually raising questions around that question. And I will leave it at that. It's a very interesting point, because it looks like there is a move towards a calling for water as a social right. And indeed, it would be important, especially for Africa, if we were to arrive at that point, given that water is also a catalyst to poverty alleviation. So I'm saying it's a very involved debate, which we can't take it lightly, because there are quite a number of factors that speak to that. Have conflict around water. Yeah. And as such, Salga and so on. But I thought I should just touch one point on the question that was asked earlier on. Yes, we are raising capital. There is a commitment at the level of the heads of state, but also there is the NEPAD program, which is about infrastructure development. I don't know the strategy of mobilizing money, but there is an effort.
Thank you. This is, I don't think there are any sessions which have generated so many questions and issues, and I thank the panelists for bearing with me as I interrupted them. So could you give them a round of applause, please? And thank you for being a small but very accommodating and energetic audience. I'll just very quickly just go through some of the issues, and I hope I'll have captured all of them. Some of the key points that came out had to do with agricultural production, you know, the loss side of it, and the appropriate technologies to address that. And the interventions would really need to be addressed within a kind of cross-sector framework. And that's something that we need to go home thinking about. What are the best ways within which the public sector, private sector, NGOs, and the broader citizenry can work together towards addressing this. There were issues to do with technology, to do with education and training in terms of utilization of these resources. There was the issue of putting water at the center of economic growth and how this has been threatened by population growth and pollution, and the strategies to mitigate that are also critical. I particularly liked the notion that we need to change the language, detribalize the language of this debate and approach and solutions, which is essentially to me an issue of thinking outside the box, and some of you have contributed to that, that kind of process. Then there was the issue of kind of elevating this to a regional cooperation to address some of these challenges that Xolani raised. I think that's a very good point, and I think here the WEF can use its network to bring some of these issues to that level. Accessibility was also an issue, not just from the point of appropriate technology, but was also a point in terms of financing, and also that we recognize the gender imbalance in making these resources available to our populations. I hope those capture the main points. I thank you for a vigorous debate, and I hope you have a good afternoon for the rest of the day. Thank you.